Councilmember Kitchen, you want to make your motion, number 49?
Yes, I would like to make my motion and then just make a comment or two in explaining the motion.
That's fine. Councilmember Kitchen moves item 49. Is there a second to that? Councilmember Renteria seconds. Councilmember Kitchen, you want to address it?
Okay, I want to make a statement. This repeats some of the conversation we had at the work session, but I think it's helpful for people. There's been some conversations this morning that were not accurate, and that I believe there's some misunderstandings and perhaps some miscommunications about what HEAL does and doesn't do. So I just want to state again what the HEAL initiative is for clarity purposes for folks. So the purpose, of course, is pretty simple and focused on starting with 4 areas, and it's focused on providing a path to connect people to housing. This is about connecting people to housing and the services that are important with housing, and to cease camping in unsafe locations. That's what this is about. So let me get a little more specific to help people understand the specifics. So we're talking about connecting to services and housing options based on the expressed and individual needs of the people living in the locations. We heard some concerns earlier about consulting with our unhoused neighbors. That's exactly what this does. It begins with our social service providers, our health providers working with people in those areas, and based on their expressed needs and their individual needs, connecting them to housing and services. So the housing services depends on what the person needs. So it could be rapid rehousing, could be permanent supportive housing, could be housing focused shelter. It depends on what that person needs. Rapid rehousing is short-term rental assistance and services. That's what some people need. Permanent supportive housing offers more permanent services for individuals who need more support. The other thing that's really important in order for this to be successful and in order to really help our unhoused neighbors is case management support and healthcare services, such as medical, behavioral health, and substance use disorder services to help people maintain their housing. That's what the HEAL initiative does. It connects people based on their needs, their expressed and individual needs to these housing plus support. There's a couple other things I just wanted to emphasize because there seemed to be some misunderstandings in the conversations earlier that we heard from folks. This adds to existing services. It does not divert resources from existing programs. It does not divert resources from permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing. It is focused on addressing the need for safe and stable housing for individuals living in locations that pose risk to their public health and safety, risk to their safety. It's important to understand that this is not a comprehensive strategy for dealing with homelessness. It was never intended to be, and it is not. It is a key strategy as one piece of a puzzle. The city is working on a broad comprehensive strategy. I appreciate the efforts the mayor has been mentioning about conversations through a summit. That's all necessary and important for a comprehensive strategy. This is immediate action for our unhoused neighbors who are facing risk to their health and safety every day. So another thing that I want to just say, just to recognize some of the concerns that people raised and some of the misunderstandings and statements that were just not accurate that were made earlier, is that really HEAL recognizes that some places in our city pose particular health and safety risks, and people are living unsheltered in unsafe locations. The resolution asks our city, the other thing to remember is this is a multi-step process. And the resolution asks the city manager to bring back to us strategies and an implementation plan to disallow camping in these 4 unsafe locations after, and I want to emphasize, after completing the HEAL initiative. This is not about sweeps. It is not about moving people to other places. This is about connecting them to housing, and only after that, recognizing that these places are not safe for camping and identifying them as being disallowed. And we have also included in the resolution, for clarity, the policy statement that when the city manager brings us back the how are we going to disallow these from camping? When the city manager brings us back strategies and an implementation plan, we have said that we want strategies that do not rely on policing or on issuing citations. That language is in the resolution. So again, I want people to understand, we have people to understand this is a multi-step process that will take time. So the last thing I'd say is, it's really, really important that we act quickly. This resolution is a commitment to start the process. It's a commitment to start developing the HEAL initiative to house our unhoused neighbors in unsafe locations. I think we all agree, and I really appreciate hearing from people this morning and all the folks that we've had the chance to talk to, because people really care. People care about our unhoused neighbors, and everyone cares. I think it's important for us to recognize that the people on this dais, the people in our community care, and what we want to do is connect people to housing. So I think there's broad consensus to move forward with with connecting people to housing, and we just need to get to it. And the longer we wait, the longer people will rely on living situations that pose major health and safety risks to them. And then finally, I just have to say this. I really believe fundamentally that we owe our unhoused neighbors protection from living in unsafe places, just as we do for our house community. I do not believe it is kind. I do not believe it is humane to allow places that pose health and safety risk to remain available for camping. So no one should have to live, for example, next to lanes of traffic at risk of stumbling into traffic, at risk of having a car, jump the curb, I think, as you said, Mayor, and plow into their tents. So it's critical, and I think that our community can do better than this. And I don't think that it is. I don't think it's right for us to continue to allow people to camp in places that are unsafe. So, Mayor, thank you for giving me the time to make that clear. We saw from our earlier testimony that there was some misunderstandings and some statements that were made were not accurate about what is in this resolution. I would like to invite my co-sponsors if anyone wants to add anything at this point.
Councilor Kelly.
Thank you. I just want to add that I've heard from District 6 residents and people all across Austin, from visitors to business owners, renters, owners of homes, and even our unhoused neighbors themselves regarding the HEAL initiative. The City of Austin staff and nonprofit partners have been working incredibly hard over the last year or so to assist in these issues. What I love about the HEAL effort is that it prioritizes making clearly needed basic sanitary and safety improvements, makes living conditions for our homeless neighbors better, and emphasizes our goal of treating them respectfully as individuals. The case management and support services indicated in the HEAL initiative will help address the needs of those experiencing homelessness. HEAL really has heart. We all know that housing alone won't solve the city's homeless crisis. And I want to thank Councilmember Kitchen for her leadership on this issue and all of our co-sponsors for inviting me to work on this important initiative. It's beyond time for us to take action to help our unhoused neighbors, and I'm proud of the work we've done to make that possible.
Thank you. Colleagues, further discussion on this item? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to my colleagues for laying that out. I appreciate it very much. It's helpful. I think none of us doubt how homelessness is one of the greatest challenges of, I was going to say of our time, but it's all time. You know, during these conversations over the last couple of years, I've just been reading up about the problem, the symptoms and the disease, and finding that since the 1800s, communities have been trying to find a solution for vagrancy, homelessness, And so I really am grateful for Councilmember Kitchen and her co-sponsors. I believe it is from the heart, to dig deep for solutions to actually help people. But I don't know. I mean, we don't have to keep having conversations about, compassion and humanity. I think we all get that part, but I just don't know that we're ready to move forward, especially given some of the testimony we heard from folks. And I think given that we were able to, we have rather been able to get so far with just a little more time to talk through what people's concerns are. Councilmember Kitchen, you acknowledged that there was some misinformation and, folks said things that weren't entirely accurate. So I just wonder if given, that we were able to, in last week's item around a similar topic, if we could do that again, in which case I would like to motion to postpone item 49 until the February 18th meeting.
Okay, we're going to give other people a chance to speak. And then you can make a motion. If you want to make a motion, you should always start with the motion rather than the debate, and then the motion.
Nobody else had their hand raised. I assumed everybody was done speaking.
It's okay. Further discussion on this motion?
But wait, what do you ask?
Kassar, do you want to make any amendments before I do?
Mayor, I have my hand up. It's Councilmember
I
Poole.
see that. Councilman Kassar, do you want to make any amendments before I do?
Mayor, Councilmember Poole is a co-sponsor. Could we let her speak?
I understand she is, but you just can't decide that one side gets to speak the first 4 times. It doesn't work that way. The person who gets to speak first is the person who made the motion. That person gets to speak first. Councilmember Kassar.
Mayor, I would like to make my amendments, but I will also allow some discussion before formally making them. I direct folks to look at the message board for those amendments. I believe that we could get to a place where the speakers that we heard would be unanimously in support if it were clear in the language that, as Councilmember Kitchen, as sponsor, just said, that the goal is to connect people to housing and only disallow folks from camping places if it's a dangerous location or if it's otherwise against the law. I think that it's understandable why, given the different versions of the resolution, and frankly, given the latest one, why there might not be clarity about that. I think that, and I would support a motion to postpone this if we can't settle that question today. But if we can settle the question today, that this is not about expanding criminalization, that this is in fact really just about housing people that are in a dangerous place, that in a data-driven and transparent way we can show as a dangerous place or is currently breaking the law, then I think there wouldn't be controversy about this. And it's clearly just it's a difficult challenge. We've all struggled with what the right way is to work on this, what the right policies are, how to lead effectively here. But at the end of the day, the goal has to be to actually address and solve homelessness with housing. And I think it is right for us to be very careful to make sure that we are not intentionally or unintentionally leading down a path towards violating the civil rights of people who aren't doing anything wrong or aren't breaking any rules. And that I think is the caution that we've heard, is because I'm proud of and believe in the steps that we have all taken to say we're not going to continue the persecution of poverty and sickness, and we're going to do something to solve the problem. And I think that we could move forward with this today if we can get to language that I believe reflects exactly what Councilmember Kitchen said, that we're going to address this with housing and services, and that this is not about expanding criminalization. If we can't get to that point today, then I would support, as Mayor Pro Tem Harper Madison said, postponement.
Councilmember Poole.
Thanks. I I think we need to take this up today. I would not support a postponement for a couple of reasons. One, we are asking the city manager to take this information and then come back to us on March 4th with his fact-finding and additional information. And I anticipate we will have a full debate on what he brings back to us at that time. This initiative, the HEAL initiative, was never included any elements of recriminalization that was introduced by folks who didn't, I guess, understand what was written. And I really want to emphasize that the concerns that were raised by the speakers this morning are entirely in line with our concerns, except that we want to act. We have been vamping on the topic for more than a year, on ensuring that we have safe and clean housing for people who are currently living out of doors in circumstances that are not safe and are not clean. It's inhumane. And we feel like at the beginning of this year, because we had to be slowed down by the COVID last year, we really need to just step up to the plate and very robustly identify folks who need our help. We have the help to give. We have the homes for them, and we want to move them out of spaces that are not safe, not clean, and pose a very real personal risk to the people who are living in those circumstances. And this is not the end of it. This should, in fact, be our entire goal. I think we have talked about housing all of the people who are not housed in our community. That is our end goal. We agreed we weren't going to do it in ways that would identify any kind of actions as criminal. We are not doing that. We are entirely on board with that. That was a unanimous vote of these. Well, I guess Councilmember Kelly was not on the council at that time, but the other four of us that are on this item took that vote. Councilmember Kitchen, Councilmember Renteria, Councilmember Tovo, and I. So it's, so I just lay that out there really strongly and emphatically, but we have got to act. And I think that Councilmember Kitchen has shown real leadership in pulling this together and iterating and reiterating the specific intentions and the specific goals. So I just want to ask the city manager one question. And we've had a number of conversations with Diana Gray, with our new homelessness outreach officer, and it's been super productive, and I'm really glad that she's on board and working with us. But City Manager Cronk, is there, and I am putting you on the spot, and I apologize for that in advance. But I want to ask you, in your reading and discussion with your senior staff and those who are specifically working on homelessness on behalf of the policy directives of this council, is there anything that you read in the HEAL initiative that would lead you to believe that we intend to reintroduce criminalization of these folks who unfortunately do not have homes and have to resort to sleeping out of doors?
Well, thank you for that, council member. And obviously this is an ongoing discussion as you debate the resolution in front of you. And so we'll continue to hear from that. But I know that our homeless strategy officer is closer to this issue. And I don't think that, as you mentioned, the decisions that have been made previously from this council would move in that direction. But as we know, as Councilmember Kitchen has said, this is a phased approach to this process.
And we're all taking these steps together with linked arms and to show the community that we really mean it and we really do care. So that's why I don't want to postpone, Mayor Pro Tem. It's because I think enough time has passed, enough water has gone under that bridge, and it's time for us to kick this over to staff to give us some specifics to move forward, and then we will get that report back. I believe it's March 4, which is 2 meetings from now. And then we can have that additional information and make sure it lines up, which we are insisting that it does, but at that point we can confirm that it lines up with with the comments that we received earlier today.
Colleagues, I just want to say that I appreciate the Councilmember Kitchen and the sponsors bringing this forward, and I think it is important. And I very much want to be able to vote to move this forward today. I also think that based on the discussions that we've had, that we're like in vehement agreement on the points. I think that everyone's intent appears to be the same or really similar. And I think that going through the amendments will give us a chance to sharpen the language to make sure that everybody's comfortable that we are in fact in agreement. And that being the case, I'd like us to move forward. When we acted back in the summer of 19, we passed on that same day a resolution that talked about what we wanted to see happen next. And the very first resolve clause in that resolution was to add greater depth to and definition to where people should and shouldn't camp or should and shouldn't be. And that's always been part of this the system that we set out. So I appreciate the opportunity for us to be able to give that greater direction, and I think we need to, and I think the community is asking for that, and I think it's real timely. The amendment that I want to be able to bring after we've gone through the kind of amendments that make sure that everybody's on the same page with respect to the points. There's apparently a convening that's taking place with the DAA and the chamber, also with ECHO, also involving the Justice Coalition. Also the Homes Not Handcuffs group to get everyone together to talk about both what are the long-term kind of implementation schedule that's necessary. And I know that one of their two big goals is to deal with exactly this issue of dealing with street management and encampments. And I think that also would be a really good place for this kind of direction to really cook, because I think that a lot of these things, we have different people in the community that are coming to them from different places, but with different ways that they would prioritize what they do first or how they do those things. But I think what we've seen over the last 2 years is that if everybody's not pulling together on all elements of this, that the whole system doesn't move forward the way that it needs to if we're ultimately really going to be successful. And frankly, it probably involves some kind of trade-offs or agreements or compromises to really move a whole community forward. I think it's also apparent that while we have great resources in the city and great people working on this, it doesn't control enough of the levers itself to actually be able to end homelessness in the city. There are other organizations outside of the city that are critical. ECHO gets the federal funding and deploys that. HACA gets federal funding for housing, has to be part of this, but is independent. A lot of the organizations that participate, Caritas, Salvation Army, Mobile O's and Fishes, Community First, these are all independent organizations that need to be part of, I think, if there can be an agreement and a community consensus could really put us in the right place. So I just want to, when the time comes, to be able to offer an amendment as I've posted on the board that allows for that if that happens over the next couple of weeks and compromises are made and people join together and major funders commit to bring in resources, that can be when the manager comes back in the first week of March. Maybe the kind of direction that because of the details and the logistics being worked out in that environment, that the manager could come back to us. So we allow the manager to come back to us and say, hey, since you guys addressed this Hill resolution, there seems to be a community consensus overall we move in this direction, and on these particular issues we move in this particular direction. And I just want to make sure that we allow for that. But I believe that we need to move forward with this resolution. But I also believe I agree with both Councilmember Poole and Councilmember Kassar that we can in fact move forward. But I think we can also do it in a way that makes everybody comfortable that we in fact are all on the same page. Further discussion. Councilmember Kitchen.
I have some other thoughts, but I'll hold them. I think what you're laying out is that we'll work our way through amendments. Is that the next step?
I would do, and I don't know it's going to take us to do that. I know, colleagues, that at 3:00 we have the second queue of a large group of people that wanted to speak on item number 61. If we think we're going to be a long while on amendments, then we should consider taking those people, or we can start on the amendments and see how quickly we can.
So, Mayor, I think they're fairly straightforward. I don't think we'll be a long time on them, and so I think it would be good for, since we've been talking about it, for us to just go through them.
Okay. Do we want to move forward with amendments?
Mayor, don't we need to vote on the postponement first?
I'm sorry, Kathy.
Mayor, don't we need to vote on the postponement first?
There's been a motion to
Stay
postpone,
present.
but certainly someone could make the motion to postpone now if they wanted to. Mayor Pro Tem.
I would like to officially make the motion to postpone the item until our next meeting. But then I'd also like to speak to the request for the postponement.
You can always speak first when you make the motion. There's been a motion to postpone. Is there a second? Councilmember Kassar seconds. Mayor Pro Tem, you can speak.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I just want to make sure that I preface the request for postponement with that I fully understand the amount of work and diligence that's gone into this. Councilmember Kitchen and her leadership on the discussion of homelessness is incomparable. That to say, though, I also recognize that our community has expressed some significant concern, and I always want to make certain that we take the opportunity to get a consensus if possible. I appreciate that Councilmember Kassar says that, he thinks maybe the language could change in a way that we assuage people's fears about criminalization. I don't know about y'all, but resoundingly, that was the concern for me that I heard from our constituents today. So maybe the language can change and, that fear is assuaged, but that was the purpose of making the request in large part. And I'll be honest with you, one of the callers said something that really brought an image to mind that disturbed me also. They talked about creating sort of temporary spaces like this, like what we're proposing, even with the full intention of not further criminalizing people, the full intention of offering the wraparound services and the goal of permanent supportive housing. I cannot unsee the visual of us putting people in a place and then for whatever reason, things grow and become something we didn't originally intend, and then having to move those people. I have that image in my mind, and that gives me pause. So I just want to make certain that we've taken the opportunity to fully understand all the implications of our actions and build in some sort of, I guess, fail-safe, around. I mean, can we guarantee that we'll never have to take people's tents and throw them in the trash and their belongings and move them from a place that we said was the appropriate place to go at another time?
Further discussion on the motion to postpone. Councilmember Kitchen.
Thank you, Councilmember Harper Madison. I appreciate your sincerity with wanting to postpone. I need to just clarify, as I said before, this is not about moving people to temporary spaces or throwing their things out. As I read to you earlier, and the language that's in the resolution is connecting people to services and housing options such as rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, housing-focused shelter. Those are not temporary places. This is about connecting people to housing and a path to permanent housing. So while I appreciate that some folks said that, I just wanted to make sure that you understand that that the language in this resolution does not talk about, moving people, throwing out their things, and having them in temporary housing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted to make certain to express what my concern was.
Thank you.
And yeah.
Councilor Kelly?
Yes, and Mayor Pro Tem, I can definitely appreciate your thoughts on that as well. It's hard for me to imagine back when this vote was taken before I was on council that it would have been such a forethought for you all to know that the homelessness would get to the point where it is now. And so speaking to that, I see a lot of value in passing this resolution today and not postponing it, because we need to act now and we need to do something to help curb some of the side effects of what was passed before I was on council. So I hope that you would consider some of that. Thank you.
So much postponement in front of us. Ready to take a vote? Those in favor of the postponement, please raise your hand. Fuentes, Ellis, Mayor Pro Tem, and Casar. Those opposed, please raise your hand. The balance of the this motion to postpone does not pass. Councilor Casar.
Mayor, I'd like to move my amendments that I posted on the message board and can speak to them, or we can debate them in turn. I would also be interested in whether any of them are incorporated as friendly, given that I tried to structure them in line with all the sponsors' comments at work session today and on the message board.
Okay. Councilmember Casar's offered his amendments. Is there a second to his amendments? Mayor Pro Tem seconds the amendments. Discussion. Councilmember, you want to know if any of them are agreed? Councilmember Kitchen, do you agree to any of them? You're muted.
Yes, let me speak to that. So, okay, so Councilmember Casar, I think yours are numbered. So let's talk from the top. Okay. So item number 1, which is page 3, line 3. And this is the section that relates to the locations, the priority 1 locations. So my co-sponsors and I think that that some of this is helpful, and so what we think would be helpful and not duplicative of what we already have is to say, is duplicative in meaning, but it helps with clarification, is to say so we have the 4 phase 1 HEAL priority locations shall, and you added only. I think that is consistent with our intent. Include locations where individuals are camping, and then you are adding in a place or in a manner that presents public health and safety risk and or that otherwise is already prohibited by 9-4-11. We think that is helpful and in line with the intent. And so that language is acceptable. We do not think that the remaining language is necessary because there is already language in the resolution about using data and other information. So I would say, Mayor, that we would accept as a friendly amendment the language that says only include, and then the language that says in a place or in a manner that presents public health and safety risks and or that otherwise is already prohibited by 9-4-11, and then the parentheses around that. So that goes on page 3, line 3.
Okay.
Okay.
Up to the period just before incoming. Is there any objection to that amendment being incorporated? Hearing none, it's incorporated into the motion.
Shall I go on to the next one?
Yes.
Okay, the next one next one is your page 6, line 19. We do not think that this is necessary because we already have this type of language in there. What this just does is this just points to for phase 2 and phase 3, our public health and transportation departments identifying areas that pose health and safety risks. That language is already in the resolution. So we do not believe that this is helpful or necessary for clarification. So we are not accepting the second
Okay.
amendment. So going on to the third one is page 5, line 21. This actually, let's see. Okay, this is the section that speaks to making okay, yeah, this is the section that speaks to the priority one locations not being available for camping. Councilmember Cassar, your language actually makes the camping makes disallowing camping and creates a camping ban that is broader than we intended. Our intent was only to speak to the areas that were part of the priority location. So we don't think this is, we don't want to accept this because we're not trying to create a ban that's that broad. The other thing that I would say is we're not, the other thing that I would say is that by accepting the first language that you have, because I know what you're trying to do is make it really clear that we're focusing on areas that pose a risk to health and safety and are reflected, as you mentioned, in the 9-4-11. So accepting that in the first section makes sure that we're focusing on that. And so it wouldn't, it's, well, again, I don't want to make it the ban as broad as you've stated in your amendment. So we did not want to go forward with that one.
Okay.
And your last one relates to page 6, line 5. And it says, it adds language again that we don't think is helpful or needed.
Okay.
We already have language that says the funding for the HEAL initiative will not be diverted from existing programs serving homeless individuals.
Okay.
So what you've added is just duplicative and not necessary there. So.
All right, Councilmember Cassar, let's go back to, let's take them in order. The first one is the language that begins in coming to a determination of, and includes the addition to the first line of the next paragraph.
Right.
Been moved, second. Any discussion on that language?
Mayor, can I speak to that?
Yes.
And I think I'm getting some interference from some of the unmuted microphones. I'm not sure.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So the language I'm suggesting, well, first of all, Councilmember Kitchen, I appreciate what it is that you and the co-sponsors have included, and appreciate the message board post. And so I think what we're trying to do is now get to language where we can all agree it upholds the intent we've all talked about. The language that I urge that we add is that as the manager comes to a determination of the priority locations, that the manager should use a transparent and data-driven approach to determine those locations. I think that that's important so that any of our work is done as we can transparently say it's not done in any arbitrary manner, that the city manager's office is then empowered to, in a data-driven way, say, well, actually this place in this area is particularly dangerous, say because this particular area is prone to flooding, or we have had cars come across this curb. I want to empower and give to the manager the administrative responsibility really clearly to determine what is dangerous and what is not. And so I would like discussion about what might be objectionable about saying that we are asking for the manager to use a transparent and data-driven approach to analyze the health and safety risks as they consider which areas to prioritize getting folks into housing. And if it's duplicative, I would urge caution and to try to include it, or would be happy to be pointed to where else it does the exact same thing.
Sorry,
Mayor,
Councilmember.
should I speak to that?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, the language that is in the resolution now already speaks to, I'm looking for it exactly, already speaks to using data and other information. It also describes 4 locations in diverse areas of the city without naming them. It is up to our city manager to name places based on these descriptions. And we have explained that beginning with diverse areas of town gives our homeless strategy officer the opportunity to pilot, assess, and learn from HEAL approaches in these 4 diverse areas and immediately begin to address pressing needs. The language that's in there right now says that these are different areas that pose risk to public health and safety. So the language that you're proposing is both not necessary and not appropriate, because what we have said is that these are the descriptions of the 4 types of areas that pose public health and safety for the city manager to use when identifying specific locations. And by accepting the language, the first language that you proposed, you have some assurance of the intent that these are only locations where individuals are camping in a place or in a manner that presents public health and safety risk and or that otherwise are already prohibited by 9-4-11. So I cannot accept your amendment.
Okay, further discussion on the amendment? May I take a vote? Let's take a vote. Those in favor of the Cassar amendment here, which is the balance of the first amendment, please raise your hand. Fuentes, Ellis, Mayor Pro Tem, and Cassar, and me, that's 5. Those opposed? Here's a balance of the dais. This does not pass. Next amendment.
Mayor, I'm just, because we incorporated no, sorry, on this one, I would still urge this, and I think I'm still getting interference from your microphone, man. I apologize.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So again, in this one, I think, again, what I'm trying to urge is that well, Mayor, actually, if I might, I think the most important ones are 2 of the remaining ones. I'd like to really prioritize those for the council and take votes on those.
That's right, Matt.
So I think of importance is Councilmember Kitchen. I am willing to, in the page 5, beginning at line 21, the one about the camping ordinance, I'm willing to leave the language that you have up top and not insert the new language. That is fine with me. I think your point is well taken there, that the phase 1 locations will be based on health and safety or people camping in a place that's currently disallowed. So I would leave that, but I would urge the amendment that strikes bringing back an ordinance potentially to further amend the camping ordinance. In this case, I think it's really important for if we're communicating to the community that we are not trying to expand criminalization, but we are actually just going to house people and try to make folks be in safe places, then we would need to bring back an ordinance, because the ordinance currently prohibits people being in dangerous places or ways that they are unreasonably making public access to space inconvenient. And so I don't think there would be a need to bring back an ordinance if indeed we are just prioritizing locations where it's already prohibited and or dangerous. So I would urge the amendment to cut that sentence that I have struck.
Councilor Kitchen?
Thank you, Councilmember Cassar. I appreciate the concerns that you're raising. Let me explain why I cannot accept that amendment. The language already speaks to not relying on policing or issuance of citations. And it also, in reference to the ordinance, it only says if necessary. It also does not presuppose what kind of language might be brought back to us in an ordinance. It's quite possible to make a change in an ordinance without implying or using existing enforcement mechanisms that are in the ordinance. So I do not want to hamstring our city staff by saying that they couldn't bring us back a change to an ordinance if that was necessary to disallow camping, understanding that we have stated our policy preference, that we do not want to stating our policy preference to not use policing or issuance of citations. And the other thing to remember is that we're not making a change in any ordinance with this resolution. So I appreciate your perspective, but I cannot accept this amendment.
Councilmember Kassar.
Thank you for the explanation, council member. But the ordinance is only really useful insofar as it gives powers for citations and policing. And so my preference would be that we strike this section, and that if the manager comes back, and I would be really concerned and would want to hear from the manager how it is, if we were trying to do it non-policing and non-citation strategies, why it is we would have to expand the ordinance. Because the ordinance currently says that you cannot camp in a dangerous place, you cannot camp on a sidewalk, you cannot camp in parks. And so I don't see why it is that we would have to bring this back. And I would hate to put it back on the council to have to try to write specific geographies into an ordinance that already lists everything we've listed here as far as danger and everything that we wanted to list so far as people camping in illegal places.
So on this amendment, I'm going to side with Ann Kitchen and the sponsors. I don't believe that there's an ordinance change that needs to be made in order to be able to make sure that people are not camping in a place that presents a public safety risk or a public health hazard. And we've had this conversation before, going back to the summer of 2019 and the fall of 2019. And I continue to believe that the ordinances that we've drafted enable our city to be able to make sure that we do that. But we haven't done that, and I don't know exactly why. But if it's an ordinance reason, I think this language would allow that to come forward, and then we could then maybe have a conversation that advances that ball. Just because the request comes back for an ordinance change doesn't mean we actually do it, but it may actually give us the conversation to better understand what it is that exists that stops us from being able to enforce our ordinances now in ways that I think that they could be. So since it doesn't require an ordinance change, but just leads us to that conversation and may enable us to daylight that issue, I'm going to vote against this amendment. Further discussion? Councilmember Kassar.
Mayor, I've been doing this long enough to sort of get a sense of where the votes are going, so I don't need to put everybody through that vote, but I have an alternative suggestion, and if people without objection want to move on.
Okay. Any objection to moving on? Hearing none, go ahead.
My suggestion then is, as Councilmember Kitchen stated, if the preference is not to expand the ordinance or to rely on policing to do this, and I'd ask that we add a sentence that says at the end of this section, right after the word appropriate signage, that the preference of the council is to not expand the scope of the ordinance or expand policing or citation as part of the HEAL initiative.
Councilmember Kitchen?
I appreciate that, Councilmember Kassar, but I cannot accept that amendment because it is already written into the sentence right before that.
The sentence right before it says, upon completion of the HEAL initiative, including strategies that don't rely on it, but it doesn't express the preference explicitly.
Mayor, I think that the preference is explicit and it's been stated over and over. Thank you, Councilmember Kassar, but I cannot accept that.
Councilmember Kassar?
Well, if there's a second to that amendment, then I would urge that one.
Is there a second to that amendment? Councilmember Fuentes, seconds that. Further discussion? Let's take a vote. Those in favor of that amendment, adding that last phrase at the end, please raise your hand. Did you raise your hand, Councilmember Tovo?
I didn't intend to, sorry.
Did not intend to. Okay.
That's okay. Aye.
The hands raised, I see, are Fuentes, Harper Madison, Kassar, and me. Those opposed, raise your hand. It's the balance of the dice. That amendment does not pass. Councilmember Kassar?
Mayor, I would urge my last amendment because I think it's among the most clarifying and important. But if me and Councilmember Kitchen agree and the staff agrees that this last line means the exact same thing, then I don't have to put us through another vote on this. What I heard Councilmember Kitchen's explanation for not and tell me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so tell him to check me here. But my goal is that I do not want the funds to be diverted from existing programs, which in my mind makes me think of housing that a person experiencing homelessness is getting put in today, or the food programs that are feeding someone today and yesterday and tomorrow that we just voted on. That's what I think of as existing programs. And then I am fine with going anywhere in the city budget that is not doing that, or that is not about to provide us permanent supportive housing next week. Essentially, I do not want us to trade. I'm fine with us making hard choices and trading other things. I just do not want dollars that our homeless strategy office might deploy for a third hotel this year, or a fifth hotel ultimately. I don't want that diverted. I'm fine with them coming back with any recommendation. I just don't want to take food out of someone's mouth from yesterday or permanent supportive housing tomorrow. And that's why I brought this language. And I know we just took some votes where we disagreed, but I think on this one, we're all on the same page. So I just would urge that we at least get this one done in some way.
Mayor, we're on the same page, Councilmember Kassar, and I think that's in the language that we've written. So as you expressed it, I think we're on the same page. So I don't think this amendment is necessary.
Okay. Manager, do you understand then, if we're not approving this, it's not being approved because it's the consensus of the council that this is already the sentiment of what it is that we are approving?
Yes, and I'm going to get a nod from our homeless strategy officer. I think she's talked with both of the the council members, and that's the agreement. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Got it. And forgive me when you bring the funding back for me to ask that question to triple check.
Sounds good.
Thank you for the pre-organized forgiveness.
Colleagues, if you look at the motion sheet that I handed out, there are 4 amendments on that page. The first one, I think, has already been covered by the earlier votes. I'm not going to urge number 1. Number 4, I think, probably isn't timely right now. Number 4 was intended to go to helping ensure that we didn't need police or citation intervention. The goal has always been to have the ability to be able to tell someone always where they can be if we ever go to someone and say, you can't be here. But we don't really have a good list of those kinds of places for people to be able to do that. I think we're going to need that if we're going to actually be able to not have and encourage non-policing interventions. but I don't think that needs to be addressed now because I'm not sure it's part of this initial process, probably something that gets added later, gets included later. The third amendment, I think, is really part and parcel of the second, so I'm not going to urge that. I'm just going to focus on the second one, which I think is important. We have, I think, a lot of people coming together, including the entities that are listed here. And in that group, and if there is a community agreement or consensus that results from trade-offs or different parties stepping up to be able to offer different solutions that are not something that our city could do with that group that's coming in 2 days. In the next couple of weeks, I would want the manager to be able to come back with things that were part of that community consensus that we might not be able to anticipate. And I want to make sure that work can be brought back to us and that we're not needlessly setting up a separate process to be doing what appears to me to be real similar work. Certainly the summit will be doing more than just this, but this street management issue and encampment management issue is a real significant part of why a lot of people, I think, are going to be participating in that community summit. So I would urge the amendment number 2. Councilmember Kitchen?
I really appreciate and am excited to hear about the proposed community summit, and I appreciate the work that you've been doing on that. I think it's going to be very helpful for informing, really for setting a comprehensive plan and informing investments as we move forward. However, it is a different, that's not what the collaboration is. The collaboration, so the summit cannot serve as the collaboration as you've mentioned, because the collaboration is a project team to work with our homeless strategy officer for, to work on the specific operational aspects of the HEAL initiative. So I do think, though, that perhaps with some language change here, we could get to your intent. I think that the summit conversations could provide information to, they will be providing information to our homeless service officer, of course, and could help inform the HEAL initiative. But your last part of it is the part that doesn't work to me, because the language you have is could serve as the collaboration. This collaboration is the project management team. A summit is not a project management team. The collaboration is a project management team that is ongoing for the operation. So perhaps that language, perhaps, not the language that you have, but just language that says that something to the effect that the homeless strategy officer,
I think your point. How about we do this? Because I don't know what would turn out, and it could be that the actual project team that does a lot of the work associated with dealing with the camping involves project team people different or apart from, or assignments or responsibilities are from different entities. So how about if we kept the beginning of the language and explained what it was, and then it says instead could serve as a foundation for the work of the collaboration, and just put a period.
I would suggest,
Today.
I'm sorry, let me let Councilmember Tovo go first.
Okay.
Yeah, I also want to express my appreciation for those in the community who are working on creating this summit. As I've always tried to emphasize whenever we're having these conversations, I'm really supportive of the city continuing to prioritize issues related to homelessness and working to end homelessness. But the fact is, we need those public partners to participate in it. This has to be a community effort to end homelessness in Austin. So I'm extremely appreciative of all of those who are working to make the summit, to pull together the summit and to pull together those voices so we can have a community plan for how we're gonna do that. I am not comfortable with the language the mayor suggested. for the same reasons Councilmember Kitchen is not. I would rather, in terms of what you were just suggesting, Mayor, about recognizing that that initiative is happening, I would suggest something more like, after community consensus, something more like that will inform, and so it says the proposed community, I thought I had it in my head and then I got myself distracted by talking. The proposed community summit intended to address and reach a community consensus that it includes addressing encampments and street management can serve as additional information to inform the city's direction, something like that. Certainly, I think that process should inform it, but I believe that we need to really be clear about what our role is and what action we're taking, and we need to have that forward movement that several of my colleagues have spoken to before. So I absolutely think that work at the summit informs our process, but it does not slow it down, nor does it dictate to the city what our direction is going to be.
So as I understand
Really
it, Kathy,
feel
and
strongly
tell me if I have this right, after management, comma, it would say can serve as additional information to inform the city's action.
That's a little
That work
different than what
okay
I
with
said,
you?
but that's fine.
That's
Could
fine
serve
with
as
me. I
additional
just wanted to-
information. What did you say, Mayor? I'm sorry. Could serve as additional information.
Can serve as additional information to inform the city's action.
I like that. If we could come up with a different word so we didn't have inform, that'd be even better. But the intent is great. I generally, that's exactly what I was aiming toward.
Okay. So I would say let's keep with this unless someone has a quick word because we have people.
Oh, I have a quick one, which would serve to inform the city's actions. You don't need additional information to inform, just say, which will serve to inform. Which information, anyway, there's a way to get there.
I know it's not really artful. Any one of those could work. Can serve as additional information to inform the city's action would be fine for me.
Okay.
And shaking your head, yes. I just want to make sure that if something comes out of that, that could be incorporated into whatever the manager comes back with. Any objection to that amendment being added? Hearing none, that amendment's added. That gets us to the main motion then, unless there's any further amendments. Let's take a vote. Those in favor of this item 49, please raise your hand.
Mayor, I'm trying to speak.
Yes, go ahead, Councilman McStar.
Mayor, I just want to explain my no vote today. We heard concerns from community members that this could lead to expanded policing and criminalization. We heard from members sponsoring the item on the message board and in work session that that was not the intent. And that if there was clarity, people wouldn't have those concerns. I hope to vote for this today by bringing forward amendments that would make that very clear. And I believe that it remains unclear. I agree and see in the resolution that this does not actually change our ordinances and our criminal laws. But it does open up the door without stating a preference that could be where this heads. And I believe that it's important for us to be proud of and stand strong behind saying we shouldn't have criminal laws that criminalize poverty or sickness and when someone isn't actually doing anything wrong. And I don't think that we need to signal that that those laws potentially would have to change, because I think that the overwhelming majority of people on the dais and the folks that we've heard from believe that we should have rules, but that they should be reasonable and that they should not persecute poverty, because instead we need to address it with housing. I support bringing more housing solutions that are included in today's vote. And I intend to support continued housing and services going to people living on the streets. But I believe that we need to focus on housing folks if we want to really address the problem. I've heard from too many people that work on the ground with our homeless service providers about how some of the folks that no longer got moved from in front of the arch are now in front of Terrazas. And they could get moved from in front of Terrazas and wind up in another district. I know that is not what any of us want to see happen. And so I hold out hope that our continued work and our homeless strategy officer and the leaders on the council can make sure that we get dollars to actually house people. At the same time, I think we have to recognize that there is a persistent campaign to misinform people in our community that the civil rights protections, essentially, that we have enacted are somehow causing people to experience homelessness. It isn't true. Taking your foot off of someone's neck does not mean you are okay with them being on the ground. But it is an important step, an important thing to do. And now I think it is our task to actually give people that hand up. So I appreciate the work to address this challenging issue, to dedicate resources, even more resources to folks sleeping in tents and to pull folks into housing. But I think with the lack of clarity around whether or not this opens the door to potentially changing our ordinances in a way that I don't support, I can't support this today.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on this item 49 before we vote? Those in favor of item 49, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Councilmember Cassar, Fuentes, and the Mayor Pro Tem voting no. The others voting aye. Passes.